just give it a couple of minutes for people to kind of log on.
All right.
But we are in a hot mic. So let's see here. Get rid of that. Technology. It's great when it works.
Exactly.
Well, cool. Well, good evening, everybody. We're here for another episode of Stories at Sundown at Willard Library. I'm Mac McCullough, your friendly neighborhood librarian. And my guest this evening is Malachi Tripaldi. Malachi is a former Lakeview student and a 2016 graduate of the West Michigan Virtual Academy in Battle Creek. In 2019, Malachi earned his Bachelor of Science degree in anthropology at Northern Michigan University. In the spring of 2022, he received his master's degree at the College of William and Mary's Institute for Historical Biology, where he is now pursuing his doctorate degree. Malachi's thesis is about his research on the human remains discovered at the East Marshall Street Well on the campus of Virginia Commonwealth University. Until about 1850, faculty at the Hamden Sydney College, a forerunner of the VCU School of Medicine, used the well to dispose of bodies stolen from nearby African American burial grounds for medical school cadavers. Construction workers discovered the bodies in 1994, but the remains were largely forgotten until 2011 when a VCU professor produced a film about 19th century medical schools robbing black graves. 2 years later, VCU President Michael Rao established the East Marshall Street Well Planning Committee, composed of community and university representatives, to begin the path to reconciliation. It's a fascinating story, and Malachi, I'm so happy you joined us, and so happy we made the connection. You're down there right now, right?
Yes. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the intro.
Oh, absolutely. It's exciting. And interesting, fascinating stuff. And it's going to be hard to talk about it in a half hour space, but we'll do our best. And we have quite a few viewers. And I just want to remind anybody that if you have questions or comments, by all means, on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and put them up. But I just want to start with, how did you find this work, Malachi, or how did it find you? You told me, and I hope you don't mind that when I posted this, I said you were actually just going for the snowboarding up there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a funny way to start it because it's kind of
many of us didn't know what we were going to do when we got off to school, right?
So. Exactly. Just got to get out of the house, Like from West Michigan Virtual, ended up going to Northern Michigan. I'd always snowboarded like with the family. And, it was small. I thought I'd be able to get the attention that I thought I really just needed to be able to focus on just my education and kind of just like growing as a person.
Sure. Yeah.
And then from there, I kind of started doing archaeology, kind of like fell into it. I'd always enjoyed sociology classes and KCC, and as well as Lakeview when I was going there. And then from doing archaeology, I had done a couple of field schools over in Beaver Island, which is the largest island in Lake Michigan, up north, kind of off the coast of Petoskey. And there was the Mormon. We were studying Mormon deposits, and then if you dug a little bit deeper, we were getting into Native Americans from about the year of 1000, and kind of this lost context that people weren't really related to, and kind of refer to them as the ancients. And doing their stuff was very interesting because that was like a spiritual site. So if you imagine people from the UP all the way down to people living in Chicago, all meeting at this place for a week to have like ceremonial trade, as well as just like everything, meeting with even French fur traders and getting beaver pelts and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then from there, we had hired a new forensic anthropologist, and she asked if I wanted to join this new project called the Body Farm, or FROST, the Forensic Research Outdoor Science, just one of those long acronyms.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to join. I thought it sounded pretty cool. So I ended up, we would get, the thing about Northern is people wanted to donate their body to science in the UP and Northern Wisconsin, but the cost of refrigerating people's bodies and bringing them down to facilities that could accept them was too costly. So they actually had a lot of people who were organ donors trying to donate their body, and there was no options. So then this popped up, and we were able to take cadavers. And then without manipulating the body with any chemicals or before any of that, we would place them outside under different stimuli and track decomposition for things like the police or the military trying to understand. I mean, if you imagine going into a wintry place, you don't really know how long a body has been there because the frost and the cold is going to stop decomposition. So it was really the first cold weather centered facility of its kind. Like most of them are in Colorado in
Mm.
the desert. So it was very interesting, and it got me interested in, I guess, anatomy and understanding people without their history, understanding people based on chemical concentrations on their teeth, on what you see on their body. It was like, like a book or like a novel you want to figure out.
Yeah, yeah, that's really fascinating. We talked about this, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But I mean, while it fired your imagination and really got you thinking about where you are today, you were a little bit conflicted about not being connected, to those ancestors, particularly, right?
Yeah, I think that that was something that was really big for me, especially when I was thinking about my next step and where I really want to begin to specialize. Because, doing the Native American anthropology and, digging up these artifacts of like spiritual significance, it gets kind of hard when your interpretation isn't matching what the descendants are saying of that. Or do I even really deserve to be seeing this? Or do I have the knowledge to understand what they were actually thinking? Were these questions that were very deep in my head? And then if you think about the traditional notion of anthropology, the old school idea, it's very much obsessed with the exotic, kind of people traveling to foreign places to write about people they really don't know. And I was looking at my own community and looking at Black people, and if you're not writing, like, who's going to do it better than yourself was kind of my end goal, and I find that I have a lot more freedom to be able to kind of say my feelings and how I feel, as well as it allows you to really get a different type of engagement from the people you're working with, who are also most of the time older Black women.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So let's keep moving. I could, I think our first conversation went on for like an hour and a half or something. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and put up the slides that you shared with me. All right.
Yeah, that
And,
sounds good.
talk a little bit about your work and this project. I mean, it's really fascinating for people who haven't been familiar with it.
Yeah, so to start off, I guess, with the East Marshall Street well, that's what this site is called right now, because it was a well under one of the medical science buildings that had been built. So if you look at this first picture, you see with the tabs and the names, those are the key dates, really, because 1844 is kind of the oldest artifacts we were able to find within this well. So we know it is at least until 1844. So in 1994, this well, during construction of the Contest Medical Science Building, was opened up. And inside of it, they found the remains with those Civil War artifacts. And then whenever you find a body doing archaeology, it's kind of the worst case scenario because it has to stop, So, but the president of the university, like most big corporations, isn't too concerned with um, doing it right as they could. So it was kind of one of those things like, all right, the people are going to be here, but you got 5 days to get as much as you can. So it was what they call a salvage excavation, where kind of notes are pushed to the side and it's kind of, let's get as much as we can and then we'll take it to the lab. And then that lab ended up being the Smithsonian. But at the Smithsonian, the remains kind of just sat there until 2011, when that Sean Utsi film came out, which brought awareness to the public university. It was kind of more of like a whistleblow more than anything else,
Yeah.
because he was working for them, tired of people not really respecting his voice. So he kind of just laid it out and was like, I'm going to make this video and you're going to have to deal with it. And
Yeah.
then doing that, they decided to align with the Institute of Historical Biology, like knowing our track record dealing with these kinds of things. And they decided to take the initiative to work and kind of sort this out the right way, along with the medical school, which is a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I read a an article in the Richmond paper about, I mean, it was so rushed when they were discovered. And, these remains were pulled out with backhoes while, scientists stood aghast, and some
Mhm.
of them weren't even recovered. They
Yeah,
just,
That's the sad part. I think they said that there's probably 70% of the people still beneath the school right now.
Yeah. Or here's a friend who's making a comment. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you ready for the next slide?
Yeah, well, I would just say one more thing.
Sure.
If we're talking about the East Marshall Street well, I'd like to put people's attention to the image in the far right corner
Yes.
of this old medical photo. You can see that there is a black man standing to the left, and that person was Chris Baker. So he was actually owned by the university, the MCV, Medical College of Virginia. They owned him, and he was the procurer of bodies. So there's a term called a resurrectionist, and the resurrectionist job was to go basically into the black community after he had heard of a burial and then grave rob those graves to bring back to the Medical College of Virginia to be used as cadavers. And it's actually interesting when they talk about building a medical school in Virginia, because this is the first one in the South. I think there was maybe one in Philly and one in New York at the time.
Hmm.
And then the big push to build one this far north in the South was that the climate could allow for cadavers to last longer than if they were somewhere like Georgia, which is a very interesting concept. Like they really thought about everything.
Yeah. Wow.
And then here's just a quick image of the site, another one. I think it's interesting to see. It's also really interesting to see that Egyptian building. It was a gift, I don't know, but that is the original MCV building. And then the well is right there. And now it's a massive hospital.
Yeah. Wow.
So I guess onto the next big part, I guess, is the public engagement, which is a really interesting part of this dynamic. So if you look at that little like word art, clip art kind of thing, you can see that we call this idea on how we talk to the public engaged and the community. We call it the ethical clientage model, which was adapted at the New York African Burial Ground, which was a big site. And I think the largest African burial ground to be excavated. I think there was something over 400 bodies that were excavated and documented and are now at Howard, the Cobb Lab. But this model works with the descendant community to put them at the forefront of our research. So when you think about how it normally is, normally the anthropologist comes in and he uses his remains to answer questions. And then the community that he's used from kind of has to do what they want with that information. But at this, placing the community at the forefront, every step of the way, we're asking them questions and working along with them. And then, so you can see you have the ethical client, the business client, and the profession. So like the profession is me, ethical client would be the descendant community, and the business client would be, the university, the people who are funding this research. So everyone is kind of involved, but in reality, the business client is probably at the bottom. We try to at least put them, and then we try to be removed in a way, right? And then the ethical client is just the focus. But then when you form a descendant community, something that's a really interesting question is, how do we pick these people? Like, who gets to make these decisions? Whose opinion, I guess, are we going to value? And then we do like a geographic social ancestry. And when you assume that power for enslaver would have been their main source of power would be the threat of breaking up the family. So they would use that to intimidate, to keep people in line on an emotional level. Yeah. So we assumed that these people would be traveling probably as far, I guess in Michigan, it'd be as far as somewhere like Chicago to Detroit. You can imagine people going back and forth, being sold and moved with the work, as well as leasing and other types of things. So we don't try to do like a DNA kind of descendant community. We do a geographic one. So really anyone who's interested and, is a Black person in the Hampton Roads area is more than welcome to be a part of our research. And it really ends up being those people who still have some type of connection to the old stories, that the folklore that we rely on.
Well, I know that this started well before you were there, but I'm curious about how communities respond when they're approached. Is it automatic? Oh, it's about time, or is it suspicion?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Well, I think we're lucky enough that one of my advisors, Joe Jones, is actually born and raised in Richmond. So he's able to serve a dual role as a part of the descendant community, but as well as a part of the anthropological community. So he's able to, and he's also a Black man. So I think he's able to give this trust and a level of acknowledgement that people might not have felt if they felt like they were going to be put on display or used for further research. And I think that, I think actually suspicion comes later. So like when people hear that they want to do this community, everyone's really excited. Everyone really wants to be involved. But then as people start asking more questions and they kind of see how long the science takes, and this is kind of, it's heavy and it's destructive in a way at the end of the day. And people start having second thoughts, and that's kind of where it goes. But that's why we really try to do like non-destructive methods as well as very minimal destruction of remains.
And just from what I've read, it seems like the community has wrapped its arms around it, and
Mhm.
vice versa.
Yeah, yeah. I think the community is very excited for this, and it seems like this isn't the only project that we're working with in Virginia. It's very much the time to be discovering these things. People are no longer interested in visiting plantations. People want to know about everyone at the plantation, as well as the people who were there before the plantation.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think the slides go into this, but it really there's been a lot of effort to really create a sacred space. Like this is sacred ground. There's memorials. There's physical art. Physical buildings and other things to indicate what happened there. Right.
Yep, yep, yeah. We're actually, once I get my data, we're working on reinterring these individuals. So this is a joint project with VCU and William and Mary, and on the VCU side, they're using DNA to rearticulate the bones that were commingled. So each cranium's DNA has been taken, and they're cross-examining that with limbs as well as like the main part of your skeletal system.
Wow.
And then with that information, they'll be reburied in West African style caskets, and they've been blessed by like Nigerian priests and people who are working with us in the community. So like a lot of other projects, you would get your data and they would kind of keep the bones out of the ground until it was done. But just to keep everyone happy and keep people's like hearts feeling well about the situation, we try to get them in the ground as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, and respect toward the deceased as well.
Exactly, exactly.
And so sounds like a good segue to get into your org, and I think that's the next slide.
Yeah.
We really start to tell. So tell us about what's your research. What is your research about, and what can skeletal remains like this really tell us?
Yeah. So I guess at the umbrella of all the research that I'm doing, do like biogeochemistry. So I do dental chemistry and I do isotopic analysis of enamel. So I have this model because I think it just makes it a little bit easier because let me go backwards. Let me keep it general again.
My over my head alarm just went off.
Yeah.
But no, go right ahead. No. Please.
Yeah, no, so I use dental chemistry and I get isotopic chemical concentrations back. And from there, I'm able to reconstruct lifeways. So judging from different isotopes and chemicals in that I find in the enamel, I'm able to reconstruct things like diet, lifeway, or lifeway, like origin, as well as pollutant exposure. And then that's kind of where this model comes in. So if you're kind of wondering, how does something in your teeth tell me about what I was eating and how is it still there? So we look at enamel specifically because it's mostly inorganic. So when enamel erupts from the gums, it kind of stays the same. And when it was forming and the nutrients you're taking in at that time are displayed in your teeth. So when we were able to do these scans with this laser, we're able to get a long line of concentrations back. And if you go to the next slide, actually,
sure,
you can see how this figure shows how enamel eruption forms through years. So these numbers are years. And when you do a linear scan with this argon laser, you're able to make a chronological date. So when I'm looking at 1 molar, I'm able to get a time of reference between maybe 5 to, let's say, 7 years. And when you add all the teeth together with like your incisors sprouting first and your molars sprouting last, you can get a really interesting idea of this person's life way from birth, or not birth, but early years until adulthood. And then when you match that with the bone data, which is constantly changing until death, you're able to get an idea where you can compare someone's early life to their late life and then see how they change. So that's when you can really get into things like origin, like you look at strontium levels, which are geographically determined. And then you can see if their strontium ratios are matching Africa in the beginning, and then maybe matching Richmond in the end of their life, which is really interesting to see.
Hmm. Can you discern different stressors that people live through? Um, I think you mentioned pollutants before or toxins.
Yeah, so we're very interested in lead because if you think of lead in a historical sense, people had no idea what that was going to do to them, but most things were made of lead. And especially when you think of Richmond at the time was an industrial city, and being an industrial city, Tredegar Iron Works, where the Civil War Museum actually is the old iron factory that supplied all the bullets for the Confederacy, and that whole factory was run on slave labor.
Yeah.
So these people are smelting iron without any idea of what that's doing to their bodies. And then me and Mac had talked about it briefly, but it's like when you think of if you think of even something like Flint and what happened to those people with a couple of years of intense lead exposure, now imagine someone for 20 years of that kind of lead exposure. They're not going to behave the same. You're going to have a thing called lead psychosis where you're actually going clinically insane. You're kind of going infertile. Like these things are very true, and these stressors. And actually, if you think about, I looked for this quote the last time we talked, but this is really what the biocultural anthropology is about. It's this quote from one of the books that talks about the rejuvenation of the field. And they say, social, cultural, and political economic processes affect human biologies. And then we seek to understand how compromised biology further threaten the social fabric. So that's a very good example of kind of how the social situation of enslavement has led to generational issues, and how we don't need to look at the macro for evolution. We can really look at the micro.
Wow, that is fascinating. So, I mean, this might be a touchy question, but I mean, these people were, used in, our application, the university's application of science, medical schools without their consent. I mean, is there an ethical dilemma there about subjecting them to more?
Yeah, I think there's a huge ethical dilemma with it. I think that's what we're always kind of grappling with. I think doing it in the sense with the descendant community at the forefront, I think very much helps making this an engaged ethical problem. I think the main part that really separates it from other anthropological things is when we start meeting with the Senate community, we tell them very, very openly what science can tell them and what we want to do and what it will look like and timelines and money and all these factors, being very transparent. And then we allow them at that moment, with obviously discussion and time, to
Sure.
decide if they want to continue. And if they say yes, we try to be as minimally invasive as possible. And if they say no, we'll work to just reinter those people. And like I have images, but these images aren't shared. It's kind of rare that I do even talk about this because we do try to get the descendant community involved on every single aspect of this research. When we do conferences, we normally try to have descendant communities sit on the board with us. So
Hmm.
when people have questions, we have a delegate working with us as well. So just trying to make it transparent, hopefully can make good science, I think, is our big idea.
Yeah. You have a couple more slides here.
Oh yeah, this is my research, but yeah, these are just kind of things, just making it easy. Like when I was talking about the mass spectrometry, you might be like, what are you looking at? Well, with just that little scan, which you can't even see with the naked eye, we were like looking with all these microscopes. We were able to get over 40 types of elemental data. So from a laser line of 600 microns, we're able to get that much information from one of these teeth. It kind of becomes hard, to not understand the importance and how valuable this will be.
Hmm.
There's a term that's very interesting called invisible people, and Leslie Rankin Hill coined this during her burial research in Philly. And she talks about how these people are invisible in the archives because they were illiterate. They weren't allowed to read and write. So they're really the only way to come up with these new stories and new narratives of slavery is to get into the chemistry.
Wow. Wow.
Oh yeah, and this is kind of what it looks like. So once I get all of those data and the numbers, we try to put them on scatter plots, kind of in differential terms, just kind of messing around with the statistics to see when we're finding similarities and anomalies. So
Huh.
this was when I took some of that East Marshall Street well data in orange and I put it on a scatter plot with other burials. So some from Africa, some from Euro-American burial grounds of like Confederate soldiers, and some African-American burial grounds. And then kind of seeing how the isotopes align. So if you see the big orange cluster, we're all kind
Yep.
of over there, but then you kind of start seeing some to the left that are mixing in with Euro-Americans. So carbon carbonate is something that has to do with diet. So why are these African Americans eating a very European centered diet? Maybe they were in the house because it was very common for people to get scraps left over.
Yeah.
So kind of doing that a whole lot of times is how we do this lifeway reconstruction.
Wow. Wow.
And I think there's one more, and this is also another one. So then but after we kind of find like a little pilot with the scatter plots, we then take it into the statistical programs. And then this is like a Mann-Whitney U test. So I've gotten doing all this, I mean, the computer does it now, but getting all these numbers, then crunching them and then comparing them to other sites for similarity. So if you see the in bolded sites are where sites are similar, or where they're, and then sites that aren't are where they're different. So then we're able to prove mathematically that these sites are significantly significant to other, let's say, Black sites, letting us get more of an idea of who these people were.
Wow. That's fascinating stuff. I should back up and let you help us explain or help us understand what is historical biology and what is historical. The name of your school. I mean, what is that?
Yeah, I think historical in the sense of anthropology is where you got to start, because there's a lot of different definitions of historic, but I guess in the anthropological terms, it's kind of when people started writing. And in America, that's going to be with European contact. But that's kind of just a term because oral history is real and that's historic. There's no prehistory, you know?
Right.
So, but that's kind of what I'm studying. And then historical biology, we seek what's so different about biocultural anthropology and historical biology is we're seeking to unracialize these remains. So for a long time, anthropology in the field of forensics, it really came from eugenics and working to categorize people racially. And trying to step away from that, we understand that there's anomalies in genes, in DNA, in frequencies of eye color that really have, people migrated. Borders that are here now were not the same 1,000 years ago. And to put people in these very strict categories from the past really it's kind of becoming outdated, and it's kind of hurting us more than it's helping us. And I think a lot of people's opinions.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does it mean as a community to know that your ancestors were treated like this? And how does a community heal from that? Or I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, if healing is the right word, but maybe it is.
Settle with it, reconcile these emotions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's really not something you get over. But when we have been doing ethnography, we have older Black individuals in the community who have stories growing up about the body snatchers. Like, people would say, be in before the street light comes in, or else they're going to grab you. And this was common folklore in the Black community of Richmond, Virginia. So I don't know if it's more of a validate, like a validity, like now people are listening to them. Because for almost 100 years, it was considered folklore, but now we're proving it. It's right. It's true. And
yeah,
I think the healing, I think there's healing through education, but for those people who are related and feel their pain, I don't think there's really much that answers help, but it's hard. I don't want to speak for anyone and say
sure.
it's going to fix everything, because it's not. It's really
No.
just going to make things more complicated, if anything.
But what you just said, it's not folklore. I mean, that's being seen, that's being
Yeah.
heard, that's being taken seriously.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it starts, because Richmond in the South, capital of the Confederacy, there's a lot of things that need to change and a lot of people whose voices need to be heard. And I think that this is kind of a start. And it's kind of a start for even just medical schools and Western notions of medicine, because we're working to change the curriculum with MCV, working with the doctors who are going to be serving most likely minority communities an idea of where their knowledge is coming from and who they should respect. Because this also is still going into common times. I mean, we have Henrietta Lacks and we have the Tuskegee experiments. Like these aren't things that are too far away from even my generation. And I think that we're still dealing with Black women dealing with insane numbers of death during childbirth. So all of these, how we acknowledge the Black community in the medical field, bringing acknowledgement to it, I think is a huge deal that will pay off for the Black community right now.
Yeah. It's one of the questions, but throughout the program, you've really been speaking to the value of diversity and equity in science. Um,
Mhm.
Really, I mean, because your own experience of being somewhat conflicted on something you worked on that was not part of your community. How important is that?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge. I think it's huge enough that I'm probably one of a few Black men in the entire graduate arts and sciences. That's kind of how big the problem is. I have a fellowship currently with the Southern Regional Board of Education, and it's all directed at getting more representation in Black fields. And I think you wouldn't really know until you go to a thing like that, and you're like, this is crazy. Like we're all feeling the same way. Those microaggressions, or maybe just dealing with whatever you have to deal with, the awkward questions or people just not understanding. It's when you get so many more people who have so many more paths, it really helps bring just a better profile to the research. And coming from something like anthropology too, it really helps because there's a lot of things that you can't just understand through digging. There's things that are raised and embedded in you, and having someone that can consult with you really helps anyone.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to you as a Black man? What does this work mean to you?
Yeah, I think this works it means a lot to me. I think that I wouldn't have accepted an MA PhD if I wasn't doing this research. I think I would have been fine with my bachelor's, but I saw the opportunity to do something that could really change the world, my own understanding of myself and my family, as well as just like who am I as I'm mixed as like a mixed person in this world. That's a confusing place to be for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
it really helps just to answer my own questions.
Uh, wow. And you did a great job because I feel very informed, and we did it in 32 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was watching it a little bit. I wasn't trying to go too crazy. Kind of back up one time. It was a good interview.
I have to echo Kathy's comment. So much of it requires a lot of my brain power to comprehend, but it does take. It's kind of foreign. And here I told you about Emily. There she
Oh yeah.
goes, Anthro Love.
Yes, thank you guys.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on, Malachi. Anything that I didn't ask about that you think we should cover or should have
Mhm.
covered, or did we do pretty
I,
good?
I think we did a great job. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to talk to people from home. I really appreciated the opportunity.
Well, and so you're out there. You're from Battle Creek all your life. You're going to be from Battle Creek. I told you, 50 years from now, somebody will be researching history about you, and they'll find this on our in our archives.
Yeah, yeah, it'll come up when someone's digging up Kellogg's or something.
And there's some family for you.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, mom.
So
Um,
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Malachi,
yes,
and
thank you
thank
very
you to
much.
everybody. It was a very well watched live stream. I told you the most people watch it after the fact. That we've been in double digits the whole time. So
Yeah, and I can respond with like my email on the original posting on Facebook. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. For the next couple of days, maybe I'll check it. So if there's any questions, just please feel free, or Mac, let me know. I'd
I
be
will, and I did
happy.
want to put up, just real briefly, if anybody wanted to learn more about the East Marshall Street Well Project. That's the website, emsw.vcu.edu.
Yep.
So there's a lot of information there as well. So
Mhm.
thank you again, Malachi. Uh, let's see. Our next program in Stories at Sundown is March 13th, and it's James Queese Williams, who is very well known here and still very much a local guy, even though he doesn't live in Battle Creek. He's right now is in Phoenix, Arizona, but his Kids Day annual celebration is coming up really soon, and gonna get a chance to chat with him. So look for that, and everybody have a great week. Better weather is coming.
Yep. Thanks, Mac. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.